I'm afraid that remaining garrison in Mariupol, they don't really have very many options. According to all reports that one's hearing, they're running very short of ammunition. And I think the Ukrainian forces generally are not able to resupply them. So I think it's only a matter of time before Mariupol completely falls under Russian control. As we heard over the weekend, the Russians did offer some kind of surrender option, which the Ukrainian forces have chosen not to accept. So I'm afraid this is going to be a very gruesome and sad end to an heroic fight by those Ukrainian soldiers. But it's going to end, I think, probably sooner rather than later, with Mariupol completely falling under Russian control. And then, of course, the Russians will have achieved one of their strategic objectives, which is that land corridor from Crimea through Mariupol to the Donbass region.
So, Lord Dannatt, you think it could fall within the next few days, I understand from what you said, and this then sets up that contiguous land corridor that the Russians have been looking for. Just explain to our viewers what that will mean for the Russian forces and their prosecution of this war going forward.
Well, securing a land corridor from Crimea, which viewers will remember was seized by Russia in 2014, but Crimea hitherto has been only accessible to the Russians by sea. Now that they have almost completed seizing a land corridor from Crimea through Mariupol to the Donbass region, which of course links with Russia proper, they will then have joined up the dots, if you like, between Crimea and Russia proper. But in a sense, this is something of a sideshow now, although an important one and an important strategic objective of the Russians. And what we should be focusing on is the Russian likely significant attack from the east, pushing west to secure the two provinces of Luhansk and Donetsk, and the shelling that's been widely reported over the last few days right across Ukraine. I think one has to see that as being part of a preliminary operation by the Russians prior to launching their ground offensive in the east.
And Lord Dannatt, I wonder if you can react as well. This morning we've heard of at least 5 missile strikes on Lviv. That's, of course, in the west of Ukraine. It's a place where many people have fled to on their way out of the country. What does that tell us, do you think, about perhaps the change in tempo of the Russian invasion?
Well, I think what that does tell us is that the Russian attack in the east that I was talking about just a moment ago is being properly prepared for this time. What we saw right at the start of this conflict, that haphazard strike south from Belarus towards Kyiv, was a very uncoordinated operation, which, as we all know, ultimately failed. Vladimir Putin has put General Alexander Dvornikov in charge of operations in Ukraine, and he is preparing this major strike in the east, striking from the east towards the west. And as part of the preliminary operations for that ground maneuver, we're seeing artillery strikes across the length and breadth of Ukraine, even as far to the western city of Lviv. Now, this is for two reasons. One is probably to continue to try and undermine the will of the Ukrainian people. I think that will be largely unsuccessful, as their spirit is quite fantastic. But secondly, I think the Russians are targeting military hardware depots, factories, and trying to erode and reduce the capability of the Ukrainian armed forces to resist their strike when it comes in the east. So I think we see the cruise missile strikes, the artillery strikes right across Ukraine as being part of the softening up, if you like, the preliminary operations before the major land strike, which will occur sometime in the next few days or weeks.
Yeah, and obviously the West is where any resupply of Ukrainian forces will be coming in from, so there are some high-value targets there for the Russians to hit. Richard Dannatt, I wonder if we can just pick up a little bit. So I know it's slightly out of your area, but I will hope that you have a thought on this. Boris Johnson's been banned from going to Russia. We've heard Volodymyr Zelensky saying that depending on how Mariupol plays out for his fighters, that'll be the end of any negotiations with Russia. I wonder, how would we even get into the possibility of having ceasefire negotiations at this stage with someone like Vladimir Putin who's prosecuting the war in this kind of way?
Well, you ask a very good question. And I think early in the conflict, I think there were very reasonable hopes that sooner rather than later, and this of course hasn't happened, that both parties would realize that neither was going to achieve their military objectives very quickly, and that some form of ceasefire leading to a peace agreement could be arrived at by negotiations. And both the Israelis and the Turks tried to facilitate such conversations, which really have got nowhere. I think we have to accept that this is not going to be a conflict that's ended in days and weeks. It's going to be a conflict that grinds on for months and possibly years. Both sides have now lost too many civilians, too many military deaths to easily and quickly give up. The Ukrainians desperately want to continue the fight and be successful. And Vladimir Putin has got to have some kind of success that he can report to his people. So I think what we're going to see, going back to what I said a few moments ago, is having achieved that land corridor from Crimea to the Donbass, we're then going to see this meticulously prepared, I think this time, attack by the Russians into the Donbass region to secure those two provinces and then threaten to move further west. And I'm afraid that the Russians, having captured those areas in the east, having captured that land corridor, will not want to give that up. And it may well be that over the time, Ukraine may have to accept that it's lost part of its territory. Russia will not easily give up that territory. And frankly, why should it? Who can make them do so? And NATO is not going to mount a major operation and throw them out. And if the Ukrainians can't, and it may well be an ask too far for the Ukrainians to throw the Russians out, then this may well become a stalemate over a period of months and years, whereby the Russians have controlled the east, have controlled that land corridor, and the Ukrainians are left with about 85% of their territory. That may be where over time this thing will wind up.